price of petrol, oh dear. I mean, you know, I used to put a tenner in the car every so often and get about 140 miles out of it. I've got a fairly economical car, but now now it only gets about 80 or 90 miles. £10 ain't enough anymore, and the price of filling up a family car, a bit more powerful than the one I've got, has surpassed £100 for the first time. That surge in fuel prices has even led to an increase in the number of drivers trying to drive off without paying. Because, you know, in some places it's about 180, 190, sometimes it's been over £2. And also, with summer just around the corner, ice cream vendors could be forced to ditch their livelihoods due to the fuel price rises. I mean, I don't know, perhaps some of the good times are actually might escape the ravages, because in downtime, in sad times, people like to resort to a bit more leisure. But the situation appears to have got so bad that the AA is now advising drivers to walk or cycle to save money. The question is, what steps can the government take? And perhaps, should the government have already taken up help to alleviate the pressure of the average consumers, like take a lot of the tax? I mean, a lot of your litre of petrol is made up of tax for the Exchequer. So joining me now to discuss this is Connor Tomlinson. Connor is political commentator on fuel prices. Hello, Connor.
Hello, Johnny. Very nice to speak to you.
Nice to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. Connor, it would be the easiest thing in the world for Rishi Sunak to take down the price of petrol a few pence and insist that the oil companies took the price down with it, because much of our gallon or our litre of fuel is tax.
Yeah, it's about 45% of your fuel bill for an unleaded petrol, and then 46% for diesel. And then if you're on the E10, it doesn't go very far anyway, because it's a lot thinner. And a lot of drivers have reported it busting up their engines and not going nearly as far. So you're just going to spend more in the time overall. And then Rishi Sunak tries selling us this line of cutting 7p per litre on fuel duty. Well, if you look at the VAT rate due to inflation, it actually went up 5 pence per litre right beforehand anyway. So the government are raking in something like £37 million extra on VAT every single day that they weren't expecting. He can definitely afford to slash the fuel bill for working families. The question is, why hasn't he done it already?
I'll tell you what, during the pandemic, during the worst ravages of the lockdown, the price of a litre of petrol went down to 99.9 pence. That was when the price of oil went into negative territory. It didn't last very long, but I didn't half fill up, and that wasn't even that long ago, 16, 17 months ago. Connor, I've seen the price move up and down, but really there's only one way this is going, and that's up. We're going to see the £2 litre being the norm, aren't we, very soon?
Definitely. And the fact that you said about 17, 18 months ago, it was fluctuating and it was quite low. One of those main things that actually happened was the American presidential election.
Right.
Now, we obviously don't get our supply directly from America, but they were a leading exporter. Under President Trump, oil actually got so low that at one point people were making a profit from buying so much, and he had to negotiate with OPEC so that the economies weren't crashing. And it's mainly because he reopened the Keystone XL pipeline from Barack Obama. That meant even though it wasn't built, the speculators market was going gangbusters. And also he made America energy independent, so we weren't relying on the loads of other countries that we unfortunately are ever since we peaked in our oil manufacturing in 2000, and then since 2005 we've become a net importer. When Joe Biden got in, if you look at the graphs, it's just an L-shaped drop from about 4,000 barrels a day of manufacturing. That's because he issued about 3 different executive orders governing by fiat rather than running it through the Congress that did a moratorium on fracking on federal lands. Some states, that's the majority of land, like Utah, so we crippled the state economy. And then one of them was tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. That abroad part is particularly key, because that's the knock-on effect it had. Not only did it shut down the Keystone XL, but it raised global gas prices and basically crippled the UK and Europe's chance of getting oil reliably from a friend rather than an enemy like Russia or Qatar.
Right. So was Donald Trump right, in your opinion, Connor?
Absolutely, unquestionably.
Yeah.
It's a real loss that we didn't have it. If Trump was still in office, I have absolutely no doubt that we would have, 1, Russia wouldn't have had the money to invade Ukraine anyway, and 2, we would have signed an oil exclusivity export deal that could have got a lot more of our fuel from there.
Would Putin have invaded the Ukraine even without these extra revenues? Do you think Donald Trump would have ensured peace in Europe? He said in that interview, didn't he, with Piers, that he wouldn't let Putin just used the N-word, he meant the nuclear word, all the time, that he said there would be consequences, obviously not nuclear ones, but to use that language.
Afraid of him. But the problem you actually have really is Putin has had the money mainly not from America but from Germany, of course. I mean, Germany had abundant nuclear power stations about a decade ago. And then when Fukushima happened, even though Fukushima was a very rare event like Chernobyl, it was mainly due to the fact that the Japanese weren't having oversights on their nuclear power plants, and they built it on an earthquake fault line. Who could have considered something would have gone wrong there? Angela Merkel, even though she's a physicist and she should have been a bit smarter than that, she decided to decommission all of their nuclear power plants, even though they were very safe and working, and just go entirely renewable instead. Now, Michael Schellenberger, who's currently running for California governor on this ticket, did the maths on this, and he turned around and said, if Germany would have spent all the money that they spent on going green, which caused massive blackouts all throughout Berlin, etc., and they were ultimately lethal, some people lost their lives because of that, if they would have spent that on nuclear, they'd be energy independent by now. Instead, they went green, and then it turns out that the renewables weren't dispatchable enough, they kept having blackouts, and then they ended up spending more on Nord Stream 2 with Russia to secure gas than on NATO, and it got on into this predicament.
So if we cut this down, the government gets 52% of the revenue from each litre of petrol. Is that right? Is that right? You mentioned 45% before. So how much of it does Rishi Sunak get for the exchequer?
Well, I've seen 45% goes on tax, and those are numbers from the RAC.
Right.
So that's, but if we're quibbling between 45 and 52, we can at least say the government's getting half of the tax revenue.
Yes.
The entire profits from petrol is going to the government, whereas only 4% is a margin of profit for retailers. Whichever way you slice it, that's theft.
So the retailer profit, you mentioned 4 to 5%, and I've got other figures here which are around 8%. The point is that these big petrol stations, there are big sites of land, interest rates are going up as well, so it's not surprising that retailers are keeping this wider amount of profit for themselves and not reducing the price of petrol, even if that wholesale price goes down overnight.
Definitely, and it's also that even though he's cut fuel duty already, VAT has eaten into that. And the thing about VAT is the businesses, a lot of them, can claim it back, whereas working families can't. So either way you slice it, that's quite obvious that either by recursive accidents or by design, working families are being priced off the road. You just can't afford a car anymore. You couple this with the inconveniences like the change to the highway code, boxes all over London placed by Sadiq Khan to make you try and incentivise to walk and cycle, just like other people have been saying, if you can't afford to, I guess you're just hopping on public transport.
Connor Tomlinson, thank you very much indeed for joining us right here on TalkTV.